You're listening to the Trailblazers podcast, episode 41, with Rana Campbell.
You're listening to the Trailblazers podcast, where we will explore the stories of successful Black professionals. Join us as we highlight the knowledge, resources, and tools of these accomplished trailblazers to help provide the know-how, confidence, and motivation you need to blaze your trail. And now, here's your host, Stephen Hart.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Trailblazers podcast. Today, we're talking with a young and trending trailblazer, Miss Rana Campbell of the Dreams in Drive podcast. Rana Campbell is a marketing strategist, freelance writer, content creator, and podcast host who helps creatives and lifestyle entrepreneurs. She works as a marketing specialist for Dotcom Distribution, and she's also the host of the Dreams in Drive podcast that was launched in January of this year of 2016. Rana was also featured on the iTunes podcast homepage for Black Voices in Business category, which is what actually sparked our connection and led us to having her on the podcast. Rana is a native of Orange, New Jersey, and is a recent graduate of Princeton University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology. Rana's work has been featured on MadameNoire, Blavity, Huffington Post, and Princeton Alumni Weekly. Now, I've posted Rana's full bio, along with all the resources that were mentioned and links to connect with Rana on our show notes page for today's episode, and you can find that at tbpod.com/Rana Campbell. As you listen to today's episode, don't hesitate. Please hop on over to Twitter or Instagram. Let Rana and I know your favorite takeaways from this episode. My handle is at TBPod and Rana's is at RainshineLove. RainshineLuv. Guys, get your Evernote app, grab a notepad, just get ready to jot down some goodies from today's episode, number 41, with Rana Campbell. Enjoy. Rana, welcome and thank you for being our special guest on today's episode.
Hi, Stephen. I'm really excited to be a guest on today's episode.
Woo woo. This is exciting. So Rana and I actually did a podcast exchange of sorts, right? So I was recently on Rana's Dreams in Drive podcast. Great episode. Encourage you guys to go ahead and check that out. Make sure I'll link that up in the show notes page. Great episode for you guys who consume a lot of Trailblazers content to kind of hear the tables turned on me and hear Rana actually ask me the questions. So tonight I get to turn the tables on Rana and ask her some good stuff. And as you heard, Rana has a little Jamaican roots to her as well. So, you know, we might have a little pato exchange here and there.
I'm horrible. I'll stick to my American accent.
That's funny. So, you know, I love to open up Trailblazer interviews with a discussion about gratitude because I feel like it sets the tone for our calls. So, you know, I'd love for you to maybe share with us, you know, something that you're really grateful for in your life right now.
So, you know, that's a really good question and a unique way to open up an interview. And the first thing that came to mind was, and I don't know, this is not really a tangible thing, but it's more of an intangible thing is, you know, I'm really grateful for in my life right now, the ability to forgive. Maybe it's just because I've been dealing with a lot of things just personally and just, you know, how life happens sometimes. And yes. I think, my ability to forgive myself and my ability to forgive others who may have wronged me or who I think may have wronged me have really helped me over the past month just keep going in times when I felt like, you know, why are people so mean or why is this happening to me? I think that whole idea that life goes on and you can overcome any challenge that comes your way and you can forgive yourself and you can move forward has really, really helped me. But I definitely think that it's something that is crucial to anyone who is trying to build a brand, trying to create a business, anything. You have to know how to really move past, you know, what can be challenging moments in your life.
Absolutely. So, Rana, looking back at your bio, you know, I saw that you received a bachelor's degree in sociology from Princeton University. Right?
Yes.
Let's talk about that a bit. Why did you actually decide to study sociology?
Okay, so that's an interesting question, and I always ask myself, did I even know what sociology was before I went to Princeton? And I don't think I did. I definitely don't think I did. But one of the unique things about Princeton is when you're a freshman, you have to take something called a freshman seminar. And the freshman seminar that I was part of was called The Ghetto, and it was taught by this sociology professor. Well, I said professor, Professor Mitch Dunier, and he was a really, really he was the head of the sociology department. We had this 3-hour class every Friday called The Ghetto, and it was basically talking about the Jewish ghettos and how they morphed into the idea of what we call the ghetto today. So it was a 12-week course where we learned everything about the original meaning of the word ghetto, how it was used during, in the 1400s and all that stuff, and how it kind of morphed into our cultural understanding of that today. And through that freshman seminar with Mitch, I really, really just loved studying, society and studying one segment of society. And it was a mix of history, but it wasn't necessarily history. And it had writing in it, but it wasn't necessarily English. It was really more focused on people and systems and society and how they work. And so I just started taking more sociology classes. And I think that it also was a good choice for me because I always had a love for people. Right. So now I was able to mix my love for people and for stories with understanding why they were the way they are, which is what sociology is.
Right. That's awesome. That's interesting. We'll talk about that transition from that to marketing in a second. But, I wanted to ask you, what was the experience like attending an Ivy League university as a Black woman?
So whenever I get asked this question, I always have to say, I feel like I'm not... Okay, so my story is unique. So I've been going to, I want to say, an Ivy League-like institution since I was in middle school. So I'm from Orange, New Jersey, which is like an urban suburb outside of Newark, New Jersey. If you guys know, people listening, they may know Newark more than they know Orange. So basically, I grew up in an all-Black neighborhood, went to an all-Black school up until 6th grade, and my parents were like, you're not going to Orange Middle School. We're getting you out of here. And I was put in a program called A Better Chance, which matches you with a college prep school. So I was basically shipped away. It was a day school, but I was shipped away to a new environment, Englewood, New Jersey, which is one of the richest counties in the United States, Bergen County, New Jersey. And it was such a culture shock for me. So I think being in an environment, going from an environment where I was not the minority to then going to one where I was a minority. 7th and 8th grade was hell for me. I went through a cultural shock, everything. And then once I got to high school, I kind of understood it, and I learned how to play the game of being the Black girl in a white girl world, if that makes any sense. Wow. And so when I went to Princeton, I already felt like it wasn't a shock to me. Whereas a lot of my friends who came from, let's say all Black public schools or who were never used to being a minority, Princeton was very tough for them culturally. They didn't know how to, as you could say, code switch, which I had learned how to do in 7th grade. They didn't really understand just the stratification that was going on a wealth level, on a educational level. There was just so many things. So for me, Princeton, as a Black woman, I felt like I was able to navigate it easier than other people I knew, just because I had already kind of been dumped in that environment before going there. And also another thing that I think really helps me was Princeton, if you are a person of color, I think what can make or break your experience is your social group and how in tuned and how ingrained that social group which you are a part of is, how ingrained that social group is with the entire culture of Princeton. So I was in a dance group, which is fairly well known on campus. So for me, being in that dance group, which didn't really make me an outlier in a sense, also helped my whole experience as well. So I want to say, Princeton for me was, as a Black woman, I didn't really experience direct, I want to say, racial undertones or anything like that. That wasn't really more of my experience. I think the toughest things for me were just trying to navigate what does life mean as a college student. Right. And it wasn't really so much, race or color for me.
Right. No, that's interesting though. I appreciate kind of sharing that backstory. Interesting.
Yeah.
You had to make that transition at an earlier age, and then it turns out it benefited you in the long run, right?
Yeah, and and I want to say that is not to say like my experience is singular. So if you were to ask one of my friends, they would tell you an entirely different story. And even I have a friend who we both went to school together from 7th grade up until Princeton. We went to the same middle, high school, and college. And she came from an entirely different background from me. So she had been in private school her whole life. Her parents were doctors, and she had been, in that private school life. And for her, Princeton was a place of exploration, and she was really able to find her roots as a Black woman, and if that makes any sense.
Right.
Whereas me, I didn't really see Princeton as like a way for me to get in touch with my inner self.
Right.
She joined a sorority.
Wow.
I wasn't about to do that. So it was just like, it was, definitely different. And we basically came from the same school, but her experience is totally different from mine.
Right. So let's come back to this, right? You completed your bachelor's degree in sociology, and then you made a transition to a career in marketing. Take us through that transition.
According to my parents, they thought I was going to be a social worker with a sociology degree. Right. So let me take you back, because the story actually starts in high school. So my senior year of high school, I was accepted into a program called the Emma Bowen Foundation. And basically that's a program that matches minorities with media companies for their 4 years of their college experience. So my first year out of high school, I was interning at CBS Corporation, and I interned in their workforce development. So each summer, I was rotating through different departments. So over the 4 summers, I was in CBS News with their magazine, with their communications department, with their workforce development department, and their business development department. So I went into college thinking that I wanted to have a background in media. And because Princeton wasn't it's a liberal arts school, there was no direct media major. So that sociology was a way for me to study people. And then through my internships, I was doing media. So when senior year came around, I was trying to get that like media job, but they weren't hiring at CBS at the time. And all throughout college, this is the ironic part of it. So my job in college is I worked at Princeton University Career Services. So from my sophomore year until my senior year, I was their communications intern.
Wow.
So their communications and marketing intern. So, during the summers, I was doing media. During the actual school year, I was doing communications and marketing with Career Services. And that's kind of how I ended up in marketing, because when I graduated from Princeton, I actually didn't even have a marketing job. I was doing a nonprofit fellowship at a criminal justice agency in New York because I didn't get a job. Like I was one of those kids who just couldn't find the dream job, and I applied to a fellowship and I got accepted because I was already part of the program that was doing criminal justice work. And I did that for a year. That was in New York. And being that I was in New York, I still had that interest in media. So that's when I started, I started blogging. I started freelance writing. So I was building my media career in the background at night, thinking that one day I would get that big time media job. And when when my fellowship ended, I didn't have a job lined up. And it turned out, this story, so I'll cut it short, but it's really ironic too. The way that I got the job I have now as a marketing coordinator at Dotcom is basically when I was at my first job, we had to take a lot of work trips. So one time I was on a plane to Michigan, and I was sitting next to this man next to me. And turned out he was a CEO coach. And this will go back to this will really tie in well with our whole idea of building relationships. So we're talking about, his CEO coaching and what he does. And I told him that I would keep in touch with him, which I did. And I told him that I was looking for a job because my fellowship was ending. And it turned out that one of his clients that he has as a CEO coach has her own company in Edison, New Jersey, which is close to my house. And he connected me with her, the CEO of the company. I met with her and she told me that she was hiring, she's building out her marketing department, and she wanted me to meet with her CMO who she just hired. And that's basically how I ended up at Dotcom. So it really wasn't purposeful at all, but it was really just how everything came together.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yes, I talked to a stranger on a plane and got a job.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that story. So, that brings us forward, right? I mean, you're a lady, as you echoed just a minute ago, you wear so many different hats in the creative space, of course. Mm-hmm. And you're doing marketing today for Dotcom Distribution, in addition to being the host of Dreams and Drive.
Yes.
Right? So what is it about being a creative professional today that generates that inspiration and motivation to keep going?
Well, I think it goes back to, so my personality type is, for any of you guys who are into that stuff, I'm an ENFJ, so it's extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and judgmental type of person. Basically, I'm an idea girl, right? And any creative, as you may know, creatives sometimes struggle with with coming up with ideas and not knowing what to do with them. So my constant energy and my brain is always going. So I know that's going to sound weird, but I think just my ability to always be thinking of what's next and what could be is something that I really enjoy having as part of my personality. And I really think that is what has helped to motivate me and inspires me, if that makes sense.
I relate because I'm the exact same way. I'm probably the same.
I was going to say the thing that I really love, and I love stories. I've always been someone who loves the art of storytelling. And I think being a creative, whether it's marketing, whether it's through my podcasting, I'm really able to think of new ways to tell stories. And that's just something that drives me. I'm a real big fan of Ty Lopez. Do you know who he is?
Yes.
And he's always, talking about how we really have to cultivate our strengths. A lot of people spend a lot of time not developing their strengths. And from a young age, I knew that storytelling was something that I really, really enjoyed. So now as an adult, I'm trying to find ways to keep that going. And I know that that's definitely something that continues to motivate me.
Right. So tidbit here. Kristen, my wife, actually introduced me to a way to download audiobooks through her library to an app on my phone. And I thought it was just like magical because, of course, I always ask for recommendations for books on the podcast. And time-wise, I have no time to physically read as many books as I'd like. So being able to tap into a resource through the library that gets me audiobooks on my phone in an app for free is just like amazing to me. So I've, in the last week, I was able to listen to Rework. And right now I'm listening to Essentialism, which is another book that came highly recommended through several guests and other podcasts I've been listening to. This book keeps coming back up. I believe the author's name is Greg McKeown. But, his basic tale in this is our society is struggle with making decisions through like the noise of life today, right? Like so much happening, right? And trying to determine what your true priority is in life and saying good, putting everything else to the side. So, as I was listening to this, I was thinking about it and I was curious to know, how are you able to be deliberate and content with the choices and decisions that you're making, right? Given the challenges with competing priorities of a full-time job, of a podcast, of other things happening in your personal life, how are you able to determine what's most important and what you need to actually put to the side?
I don't know. No, honestly, that has been a struggle. And I think it's a struggle for a lot of us. I want to say us multi-passionate entrepreneurs, right? People who we're always constantly being pulled in so many different ways. I think, if I were to answer this as Rana in 2016 answering it, I think my answer today would have to say, I now understand that trying to do it all doesn't reap any good benefits.
Right.
Just because, in college, I was balancing a lot of different projects, so that I didn't really have time to really pursue different things and pursue them well, I want to say. But once I graduated, I had a moment in time where I was trying to do everything. I had my full-time job, I had my freelance writing, I was trying to run my blog, and nothing was really being done. As my father would say in my best Jamaican accent, you can't do two things at once, right? So it's just, I was burning myself out and I wasn't seeing any results. So in 2000, beginning of this year, I told myself, and this is something I think we discussed in your podcast episode, on episode 41 of Dreams and Drive, is I told myself I was going to focus on Dreams and Drive only. Like, I had my own blog. I said, you know what? It's not important. People weren't really reading it anyway, right? I was just going to focus on Dreams and Drive. And by doing that and by making a single goal and by being consistent with that goal, I started to see results. Yes. And I'm the type of person that if I see the results, I'll continue to do it. If that makes sense? It's like kind of like that positive reinforcement. So I saw that by consistently showing up every week with an episode, and by consistently doing things each week, I was getting results and I was growing, and it was something that I could track and I knew why I was doing it. So that was like a light bulb to me, like, hey, when you actually focus and when you say no to other things because they don't align with the goal that you set for yourself, things get done and things happen. So that's just been something that I've now incorporated into my life. Is I was so scared to tell people no. I was so scared to say, hey, I can't do that, or, I don't have time to do that, because I wanted so much, just being a young adult, you want people to like you, you want to seem available, you want to seem busy, but just through life, you realize that really doesn't pay off in the long run. And that's why I started making the deliberate choice to just really focus.
Yes. I relate to that so much on so many levels. And definitely know I shared a very similar chord on Dreams and Drive. So you're almost at your year mark with the podcast, right? Yes.
The end of the year will be the year. So I started January 1st.
You did?
Yes.
That is so awesome. So let's talk about the podcast for a little bit, right? What initially fueled the idea for Dreams and Drive, and why is Dreams and Drive the essential part of Rana today? You kind of touched on that a second ago, but what fueled the start?
So I had always been doing interviews for like my freelance career. I wrote for different sites such as MadameNoire, and I was a Huffington Post contributor. So I had always, I realized that I had a knack for interviewing entrepreneurs Q&A style. And I did that on my blog for some point, but I realized that I hated doing the transcription and writing up the interviews. It just all took so long, and I don't really think people were engaging with the content that in a way that I knew that these entrepreneurs were giving a lot of great gems, but I think they were getting lost in the actual written word. And I had this idea, I saw a lot of people. Lewis Howes was a really big inspiration for me in the beginning. I love his podcast, The School of Greatness. I met him in person. I was like, hey, you're going to be on my podcast one day. And I told myself that I needed to start a podcast, and I was actually interviewing someone from my Brand Maker series, and he told me, what's stopping you? And I made up all these excuses about what was stopping me, and he said, stop it, buy a mic and make your podcast. Wow. And that was August of 2015. I still hadn't bought my mic by October of 2016. I actually have a funny story. Is I was with my boyfriend in the Checkers line. We were getting funnel cakes, and there was this sign, or there was this garage outside of the Checkers drive-through that said no parking. And I asked him to take a picture of me next to it.
Really?
Yes. And I posted the picture online, and I wasn't even thinking about calling my podcast No Parking. I said, hey, people, I want to start a podcast. What should I name it? And my cousin was like, No Parking, duh. So that was the first name for the podcast, No Parking. I bought the mic eventually. And when I was in GarageBand testing it out, I was pretending I was like Oprah or something and said, hey, this is the No Parking podcast. I'm going to help you put your dreams in drive. And then I had this aha moment.
Wow.
And I said, dreams and drive. And that was the whole evolution for it. And I set a date. So this was October. I said, you know what? January 1st, I don't care what it is, I'm releasing the first episode. I'm going to have a website and an episode up by that date. Just so happens I was introduced to this guy who lives on my block my entire life. We're the same age. My best friend introduced me to him. Turns out he was an audio engineer.
Wow.
He helps me. He was the first guest on the show, David Michael Jones. He helped me do the podcast drop. It was just funny. All these things were aligning, right?
When you decided to take the step forward.
Yeah, all these things aligned, and I released the first episode on January 1st and told myself I was going to release one episode a week since then, and I've been doing it at 42 episodes in as of, the time that we're recording this podcast, and that was the whole impetus for me starting Dreams and Drive. Is I knew that, as I said, I knew I loved storytelling. And I think I had been learning how to tell stories, by blogging at Career Services, by doing all the stuff at CBS. I had been building up the tools, even by doing freelance writing and actually transcribing interviews. I had 2 years of that under my belt. So the podcast was a great way for me now to show my voice and to actually show people what I think my skill is. And it was the evolution. I guess it was the next step in the evolution of the Rana Campbell brand, which I had really, when I was younger, my teachers used to call me Chatty Cathy and my mom used to call me Oprah. So
perfect.
That's why.
Wow. Well, I'm happy that you took that step forward in faith and saw the podcast through. I love Dreams and Drive. I enjoy listening to your episodes. And, you and I are both, because I launched at the beginning of February, so I'm a month behind you. Mm-hmm. And you and I are both learning this year, right, from our growth in the podcast space, that entrepreneurship is the in thing. It's sexy. And podcasting is as well, apparently. But being a successful podcaster in an interview style format really boils down in many ways to the ability to build the right relationships, right? And, I wanted us to talk, we've kind of had a discussion about, a theme around this episode, talking about building relationships. And I'd love you to maybe share, what have been some of the lessons that you've learned about building relationships, especially through this process of growing Dreams and Drive?
Ooh, good question. I think, high level, the thing that I've really learned about relationships is that, they shouldn't be, you have to view relationships as ways to provide value and ways to connect value to other people. Because I think a lot of times when people go into relationships building, they think about what can I get out of this?
Yes.
But when you focus on what you can give to other people, you get so much more out of, the long-term bond that you're able to build. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned is just relationships shouldn't be about you. They should be about the other person. If you focus on what you can give to that person, you'll get so much more. And I have a little, some high level things that I want to talk about as far as relationship building goes, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
All right. So I have some steps for everyone who's listening in. I think the number one thing, if you're approaching, any type of relationship, let's put this into perspective. So let's say you are trying to connect with someone, right? You really definitely need to start with knowing who you are and why you're doing this. A lot of people go into relationship building and they don't know their why. And I think if you don't have a goal in mind, then you can be lost. So whether it's, you want insight, you want to connect with other like-minded people, you have to know your why, and you have to know what's motivating you. And then you also have to know what's your value add. What are you bringing to the other person? Whether it's, you're a resource, whether you're sharing some type of asset, whatever it is, you definitely need to know what the other person can get out of building some type of relationship with you. Another thing that I think is important is the idea of being genuine.
Yes.
I can even tell you this just from podcast pitches. So I respond to podcast pitches that I think people have actually taken the time to to research. Like, don't pitch me. And I know that it's not genuine. I know that you haven't listened to an episode. I know that you have no idea.
I need to be on your podcast.
Yeah, like people have sent me pitches that say dreams and drive, and I'm like, you never listened to this. That's not the name of my podcast. Just things like that. Like I'm somebody who bases things on feelings, and I think you get so much more when you know that what that person is asking of you is something that they actually want, and they're being genuine about it. So that's another big thing. I think you have to really, really understand people's desires. I learned this from my mentor early on in life. She told me, her name is Gabby Simpson. She told me that when you're asking for something, you have to put yourself in the mind of someone else. And what would they get out of it? What do they want? What motivates people to actually respond to you? That's been something that has really helped me in relationship building, is being able to put myself in the other person's shoes.
Right.
And it's not something that I think a lot of people think about a lot of times. It's kind of like knowing how to sell. I really think anybody who wants to get better at networking should read some books on just basic sales techniques. I know it may sound awkward, but you really have to understand how to answer the question, what's in it for them.
I love it. You could keep going for an hour.
Oh, so, that's bad.
The great thing here is, so you've laid out some of these key points, right? I think they're a great foundation for any relationship, right? How have you been able to apply some of these principles, some of these tips that you've shared to building and sustaining relationships that have developed through maybe guests that you've brought on to the podcast?
That is a really good question. As we're speaking, I'm actually scrolling through all the guests that I've had on the podcast, and I'm trying to see if there's a story that comes to mind. Okay, so I actually have one. So episode 6, Sakita Holly, she's also a podcast host of the Hashtags and Stilettos podcast.
Right.
So Sakita Holly, I messaged her when I was a senior at Princeton, and I messaged her because at that point I thought I wanted to be a public relations professional, and I was reading up on top public relations professional women of color in New York City, and her name popped up, and I sent her a message, and I was like this bright-eyed college student asking her, can I have 30 minutes per time for informational interview, which was a good skill that I had learned from working in career services, that always asking for that. Like, that's use your college student status as a way to kind of get people to talk to you. So she obliged, and we had a really good conversation. And she told me, she was like, if you just keep on following up with people, you will go far. And I never let my relationship with Sakita die. I always followed up with her, whether it was on Twitter, whether it was through emails. So over the course of 3 years following college, we had become internet buddies, and we had never met. And it's funny, I actually met her randomly at a trade show in Secaucus, New Jersey.
Wow,
totally random. And it was one of those moments where, like, oh my gosh, we're finally meeting in real life. So when it came time for me to do the podcast, she was someone that I knew I wanted to have on the show, and she had no hesitation in being on it.
Right. And
we have just really been able to grow professionally, and I think even personally, because she just gives me a lot of life tips on, how to not get screwed over with freelancing and all that other stuff. So she's one of the first examples of a podcast guest that I have been able to really, really build a good relationship with over the years. And through the podcast, it has really been manifested.
That is really awesome. And I'm looking back at these tips. I was writing notes here. I am blown away. I can't wait for people to consume this. If you're listening right now, you need to go ahead and hit like that 15-second rewind a few times. Open your Evernote and take some notes, because Rana just dropped some knowledge on you guys.
If you love Evernote, Steven, we got to get you that sponsorship soon.
That's right. So Rana, I was actually having a conversation just this morning with a listener of my podcast, and we were talking about how much I think being the host of Trailblazers has helped me in so many ways with my communication skills, both in business and even in my personal life, right? I feel the strength of my conversations, right? And my ability, most importantly, as a man, my ability to listen a little more effectively, which is a struggle we have, right? And, I'm curious to know how that's been for you. How has being the host of Dreams in Drive and the knowledge you've gained as a host helped you in your everyday interactions, your communication, and your personal growth?
I think from just a basic technical perspective, as you said, I think the show and me having a genuine desire of it to get better, I've been forced to become a better listener. I think anyone, like if you listen to your first episode versus your latest episode, you realize how you really started listening to your guest more.
Yes.
A lot of times in the beginning, I was so caught up on, asking the right questions and it being in the right order.
Right.
And if I didn't do it in the right order, I thought I messed up and whatever.
Are you trying to find your place?
Yes. Wait. No. Question 6. So just being a better listener is definitely something I think that I've developed. I think something else that I've also developed is that being able to give myself constructive criticism and to give myself feedback and to actually listen to it. Only because when you're editing your own podcast, you hear a lot of your own thoughts. And you hear a lot of what you're saying. And I'm like, why did I even say that? Why didn't I let that person speak? You hear your voice so much more. And when you're editing your own voice, you think of ways that you can be better. And that has definitely been something that I've developed. And I think something else is I learned to not be selfish. And I say that because a lot of the people that I've interviewed are people that I genuinely find interesting. So there are a lot of questions that in the beginning, I used to ask people selfishly. I wanted to know the answer to this so that it would help me in my life. And I realized that Dreams in Drive, I don't want to say I realized it because I started it because I wanted to help other people, but we always have selfish motivations. We have to know what drives us. Right. At some point of this whole podcast, I want to be known as a great interviewer or whatever. So I think I started to, as the months went on, I started to think of the actual dream drivers more. I started to think about the community. I started to think of questions that people would want me to ask the guests that I had on the show. And I actually got that from, I listen, since I'm in the New York City area, I listen to Hot 97 every morning. And one of the things that Ebro in the morning, he's one of the host or whatever, he always says that people get mad at him because a lot of guests get mad at him because he asked the questions that the fans want him to ask.
Right.
And that was something that I had to start incorporating in Dreams in Drive, is not making it so much more about me, but asking questions that people could actually learn things from. Right. Because at the end of the day, the listeners are the ones that are helping to grow the show.
Yes.
And if I'm not thinking about them, then I should just be having informational interviews with these people and not publishing them to the public. You know what I mean? So that definitely was something that I learned from over the, these past 40 episodes, is that when you start focusing on what you can give to other people, so that's just the relationship building thing we're talking about, how you can provide value, you will start to see results and you will really start to grow. And I'm finding that, the episodes where I'm really asking questions that will help people listening, those are the ones that have gained a lot of traction. And my childhood friend actually told me this best. We were having a conversation about the podcast, and she said, Raina, I already know you. I don't really care about you that much. I want to know about these guest stories. Right. So that was, I know she was joking, but you get what she means from that too. So
Raina, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this too, and I know you'll relate to this because we're joking about just the need to ask the next question, and especially as we're talking about building relationships and people are out there networking. You have Raina talked about knowing the value add and knowing what you're bringing to the other person. You really have to be able to listen effectively to what people are saying, because sometimes, all too often, we as young podcasters were rushing through our objective, right, or questions, I know, while I've been editing earlier episodes, I heard someone tee up the perfect opportunity to follow up on a response and get that nugget out of an episode and miss that opportunity because I was being selfish to move on to the next question in that regard, right? And so sometimes, we miss that opportunity, as you've echoed, to really unpack and build a relationship, really kind of giving more than trying to get from that relationship by just really tuning in, listening in, figure out how you can really help that person, right? I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I totally agree with that, because once you stop doing it, it just flows so much better. You know what I mean? I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm getting emotional now. It's really enlightening when you come to that realization.
Yeah. And
there's so much that you get when you allow it to happen, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so happy that I feel like we are both growing as podcasters and learning about this. And this is real. I really hope that people are able to capture the value in what we're sharing right here about, building relationships. So, Rana, I wish this interview could carry on for another hour, but we're about to wrap up. But before we do, I'd love to share some of your resources and tools with our listeners. And one of the things we always ask is, what's one book that you've read that's inspired you most?
So I'm a bookaholic. Like, I've been reading books since I came out the womb, literally. But I think this is going to be so cliche because I feel like this is a lot of people's favorite book. But the book Think and Grow Rich,
Napoleon
really,
Hill. Yeah.
I love that book. I think it was one of the first self-development books that I read out of college. So I wasn't reading in college. I was just doing schoolwork. So once I graduated, I started reading again. And before college, I read a lot of fiction. But now I'm reading a lot of like self-development and nonfiction books. Right. And that book was just really, really helped me understand that I was never going to succeed until I mastered who I was and mastered the art of self and how your thoughts become things, right? Or things become thoughts, whatever that is.
Yes.
I love that book. I would recommend it to everyone. I actually bought it for a few friends. Like, hey, read this. It's really good.
So, Rana, what's something small that you've done this month that you're proud of?
Oh, that's a good one. Something small. I think, Stephen, I can't think of anything. Something small. You know what? I made a goal for the end of the year. That's good for me because I'm somebody who sometimes I think things out and I don't actually write them down. So I actually wrote down my goals for the end of the year. And if you know me, that's really, really good. So I'm really proud of myself for that. And I'm hoping that I check those things off the list that I have for the end of the year.
Love it. Love it. So we want you to name an online resource. It could be an app, software, or tool that you use every day and you can't live without it.
All right. So I'm going to have to say, because we're talking about relationship building and networking, I am a Gmail user and I love the app called Streak app. And the reason why I love Streak app is because, I'm constantly sending emails to people, and it's basically a CRM, a customer relationship management tool for your inbox. Right. And I use it specifically for scheduling emails and for creating email templates. So basically, Streak app allows you to do, let's say I'm sending an email tonight and I'm writing an email tonight. I don't want to send it until tomorrow morning. It allows you to schedule the emails in advance. So if I'm working at night, I don't have to worry about going into my drafts and trying to send them later. So that's why I love it. I also love it because it has this feature called snippets, which allows you to create auto responses. So because I do a lot of podcasting, as you know, we have prep documents, we have follow-up documents. I can basically type a hashtag into an email, and an entire email will auto-populate based on the snippet that I created. So that's been something that has helped me tremendously. As you may know, Stephen, when you are on my podcast, you got the prep document, you got the go live document. Yeah. I'm able to create that with just a hashtag. And the last reason why I love it is because it also has email tracking. So if you want to be a good relationship builder, you have to be very organized.
Yes.
And I keep track of everyone that I talk to, everyone that I reach out to in an Excel document on Google Docs. And if you go to your Gmail with this tool, you can see when someone has viewed your email, and you can see when they viewed it, how many times they viewed it, even where they viewed it. And I know it's kind of creepy, but it just helps me in my networking and my outreach follow up. If knowing if someone has emailed me, if someone's opening my email. So a lot of times, like one time I could see that someone kept opening my email that day. So I sent them a follow up. And they responded and said to me, "Oh my gosh, I was just looking at your email." They didn't know that I had this tool. So yeah, Streak app.
So hold on, so Streak, STREAK?
Yeah, streakapp.com.
Wow.
Or maybe it's just streak.com. But I think if you're going to install it, it's just, let me tell you right now, it's streak.com.
I am so downloading that the second we get out this interview. That is awesome. So, Rana, before we wrap up, I'd love to invite you to share one action all the inspiring trailblazers listening to this should commit to this week to help them blaze their trail.
So I think one thing that is so important, and I guess I'll bring it back to the whole idea of dreams and drive. Let's get a good tie-in with trailblazers too. Is I think a lot of times we're scared to really be truthful with ourselves or what our ideal lives could look like or what we want our ideal lives to be. And I think if we're truthful with our strengths and take the time to really just sit down and create a storyboard, it doesn't even have to be an exact plan. But I think sometimes we don't actually take the time to be honest with ourselves and say, hey, if I could do anything in the world, what would it be? What would that be? So I would say for everyone listening in, make sure that you take the time to really be honest with yourself about your strengths. Take inventory of what you're currently doing, and if you think you're in line with what it is that you should be doing. And I think when we start to actually take the time to map out our desires and map out our dreams, even if we don't have a exact plan, that just leads us on a road to really discovering ourselves. And I'm really big on self-development. I'm really big on mastering yourself before you try to master other things, because I don't think that you'll be successful until you really have an understanding of your why. So take the time this week, people. Take the time to really ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? What is it that I want to achieve? What is it that I see for myself? Don't ask other people at this stage. Just really ask yourself and be truthful with yourself. And I think that can uncover a lot and help you as you take the next steps in life.
Love it. Love it. Rana, before we let you go, please tell us how we can stay connected to you, and we'll finish up for today.
All right. Well, for everyone listening in, you can find me personally at Rana Campbell. So that's just Rana Campbell, like Campbell Soup, CAMPBELL.com. That's my main landing page. And on social, you can find me at Rain, RAIN, Shine, SHINE, Love, LUV. And that's just a nickname. I always ask myself, why did I never change my social media name? It's just something I've had since high school. So I said, hey, I'll just use that. And of course, if you want to listen to the Dreams and Drive podcast, all you have to do is go to dreamsanddrive.com or find us on social at Dreams and Drive across the board.
Love it. Rana, thank you so much for being our guest. Really appreciated you. I can't wait for this to drop.
Thank you, Stephen, for having me on, and I hope that everyone listening in was able to, come away with some gems today.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for today. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Trailblazers podcast. I'll be posting links to all of today's book recommendations and links mentioned on our show notes page at tbpod.com. If today was your first time listening to the Trailblazers podcast, I just want to extend a warm Trailblazers welcome to you. We're so happy to have you here, and we encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button in your favorite podcast app. Go ahead and browse through some of our past episodes to keep the knowledge flowing. If you're a fan of the podcast and today's content, and you're maybe already subscribed to the podcast, please continue to share and invite your friends, your family, your colleagues to listen to an episode that you think might impact them most. We believe that someone listening to these inspiring stories will be moved to make significant changes that will have generational impact for many others, both now and well into the future. Don't miss next week's episode. New episodes are released each and every Monday by about 5 a.m. Eastern. Trailblazers, jump off this podcast today. Go find a way to rise above, go way beyond, and keep blazing your trail. Cheers.